then, and he mentions his brother James. So you have two names with J's in there, right? You don't get a J, a letter J in the English alphabet until 1630. It's in my book. My wife, Anella Mayotte Williams, wrote chapter 9 in my book, The Historical Origin of the Letter J, and she explains that. And I explain also in my chapter in my book, Historical Origin of Christianity, in chapter 8. Okay? So, how can this Flavius Josephus write about some Jesus that never existed? Okay? Now, the third thing they say about Josephus, that he was supposed to be a Jewish historian, right? In the first century, there was no Judaism, so how can he be a Jewish historian? Judaism, as I said before, is not a BC religion. It came about from the creation of the formula that Rashid created in the late 11th and early 12th century, the last of the three major Western religions to come into existence. I'm telling you something nobody else is telling you. Okay? So, and then the fourth thing, if an individual will go and get them a set, go to the library and find a set of Encyclopedia Judaica, and you look up Josephon, J-O-S-I-P-P-O-N, and in this literature, this Josephon literature, it will tell you that there was no Josephus. And these encyclopedias was written by Jews. See? So that dispels Josephus. Then they said, Philo Judaeus, a Jewish philosopher. How can there be a Jewish philosopher by the name of Philo Judaeus who speaks about Christians and etc., etc., and supposed to be a Jewish philosopher when there was no Judaism during the time of a supposed Philo Judaeus? No Judaism. That goes right back again.
What time are we talking about?
We're talking about in the latter part of the first and early second century.
So that's when he wrote.
Supposedly.
Supposed to have wrote.
Supposedly, yes. Okay. Then the next person was Eusebius Pamphili, or Eusebius of Caesarea, a 4th century, they say, church historian. What church are you talking about? They're talking about the Roman Catholic Church. In the 4th century, like I mentioned before, there was no Christianity, no Christ, and no Christian church. See? You don't get a Christ until the Council of Ephesus, like I mentioned, 431. You don't get Christianity until the close of the Council of Chalcedon, 451. And you don't get a Christian church until Justinian and his wife built the world's first Christian church called the Hagia Sophia in 532. You see? So now here you have a Eusebius Pamphili, also known as a church father, or the father of the church, when there was no Christianity and no church. So Eusebius is an incarnated name that the Europeans used to write through. You see? And I'm going to explain how you incarnate a name after I tell you about this Pliny the Elder. There's never been a Pliny the Elder who's supposed to have lived in the 1st century. Okay? So these names are supposed to have given validity to the Dead Sea Scrolls. You see that? So what they have done, they have incarnated names. The Europeans are very clever at doing this. And our people in the African community better understand what I'm talking about, simply because this is how you incarnate a name. You take a name, any name, you make a body for it, you put flesh on it, and you attach a narrative story to that name. And once you attach a narrative story to that name becomes alive in the minds of the reader. You see? And then they take that name with that attached story to it. They can put it in their school system. They can put it in the Bible. Then they teach it from generation to generation. And people believe that because it's in the system. But it's just an incarnated name that they use to write through. You see? So, Flavius Josephus, Philo-Judaism comes out of what is known as pseudepigrapha, perky or both literature, with incarnated names, with attached stories to these incarnated names. Eusebius Pamphili comes out of patristic theology and literature, using incarnated names that was used by the religion called Christianity. You see? Perky or both is a form of writing used by the religion called Judaism. So we have to understand what's going on, what has gone on, and what is still going on around us to come into an understanding of how these various religions came about. We have to know that.
Now, it was very necessary for us to go through the Christian, to the way that that Bible was constructed in order to understand the next phase that I want to go into, and that's the falsification of our history. And I'd like for you to kind of explain to us, you know, how that history that the European wrote is then written out of the Bible that they wrote. And so the places like Mesopotamia and Ur and Sumer and the Hyksos and all of these then are justified on that book, the Bible. And then I want to begin to deconstruct all of that. So can you begin to make that connection so that we will establish Bible literature, which you have already told us is a 19th century, 18th century creation that is somebody else's story. And then they take the Bible and write history with it. So kind of explain how they did that, how that's done, and then let's deconstruct these the different places and events that they ascribed in to the history of Africa, ancient Egypt.
Well, like I said before, Clemson, is this. The Old Testament came out of the religion called Judaism. Judaism is not a BC religion. It's the last of the three major Western religions to come into existence. Okay, you got Christianity, Mohammedanism / Islam, and then Judaism third. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. So that religion came about in the late 11th and early 12th century, created by one Rashi, Solomon Bar Isaac called Rashi. I said that you cannot advance Judaism past Rashi.
Correct.
Nor can you advance Judaism past the First Crusade, 1096. You have to understand that the Bible, the Old Testament, came out of the creation of the religion called Judaism. Mm-hmm. One has to understand that the New Testament creation came out of the Roman Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. Okay? And we're talking about in the 16th century by way of Desiderius Erasmus, the homosexual, who wrote the Novum Instrumentum, or the three synoptic gospels. Mm-hmm. So you have to understand that. And then, as the years progressed, okay, they began to add and embellish both books. I said that both books, the Old and New Testament, was put up on the one cover by one Jacob van Liesveld in 1527. Mm-hmm. Second person to do it was Martin Luther, 1535. Mm-hmm. Okay? Then you got to go back into the Renaissance era that I mentioned prior in this viewing here. Mm-hmm. That during the Renaissance era was a time when the age of new learning came to Europe, because the masses of Europeans were illiterate, couldn't read or write, and at that time a school system was set up, was beginning to be set up for the purpose of teaching the Europeans to read and write. Mm-hmm. So they called it the Renaissance era. Mm-hmm. And they created schools for that. In the school system that was created during this time, they set in place, as part of their curriculum, history as a subject. Mm-hmm.